Every sip of Coca-Cola brings you closer to the excitement of the FIFA World Cup 26. Because nothing compares to the joy. So grab a Coke and drink in the FIFA World Cup 26. No purchase necessary. 13 plus in 50 U.S. states and D.C. with a web-enabled device. Ends March 1st with 8 entry periods. Rules at cokeurl.com/soccerrules.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hey guys, welcome to another single shot series with Jacob here, and we're going to continue on down the road of Thompson Center Arms stuff. So with the last episode that came out with Greg Ritz, we talked to Greg, the man behind Thompson Center Arms and the resurgence of that once great company. We're just going to go ahead and filter right into a single shot series and cover some more of the history and some of the guns on Thompson Center Arms. I just want to kind of get all this out there about them because it's a company that I honestly feel pretty strongly about now, especially after talking to Greg and hearing all that he has planned for the company and all that stuff. I think it's just a really cool thing that he's doing. The whole history of, a company being family owned and operated for so long and building up such a successful brand and then being bought out by a bigger company and just seeing it kind of get pushed to the wayside once Smith and Wesson kind of realized that they couldn't uphold the, I don't know if I should say values of Thompson Center Arms properly, but that's pretty much what it boiled down to, and it just wasn't as near as successful after the buyout from Smith and Wesson, and then being pushed off the side, and then Greg coming through and being like, we need to buy this thing back, and getting with some of his buddies and just getting it done. It's a really cool company, I think, and I just feel pretty strongly about him. Like I said, Greg is the man, and I'm really excited about this company and seeing it come back from basically the dead, right? So we're going to go ahead and keep it going. I'm going to cover some of the history of Thompson Center Arms, which I'm sure you guys have kind of heard before already through conversation, but I'm just going to dive into that a little bit, and then talk about some of the guns and kind of the excitement behind this company getting started all back up. So here we go. Thompson Center Arms. It starts all the way back with Warren Center when he was employed as an engineer with Harrington and Richardson. And in his free time, he was tinkering around with the idea of making a high quality single shot break action pistol with interchangeable barrels. So you would be able to quickly and easily shoot different calibers out of the same gun. So he had this idea that he wanted to make a handgun that was a single shot, switched between multiple barrels and same platform basically. So he had this idea and he wanted to make it into fruition. So he was tinkering around with his idea. And then shortly after that, in like 1965-ish, he joined forces with a very little known tooling company at the time named KW Thompson Tool & Co. And by 1967, they unveiled the Contender pistol. So I think Warren Center started tinkering around 1963, joined forces in 65. Then by 67, they were ready to unveil the first Contender pistol. And this was a huge hit, but when they first started out. So even though the Contender pistol at the time was selling for more than revolvers were, but with the enhanced accuracy and the flexibility of easily swapping out barrels for different calibers proved to be very popular among handgun hunters especially. So handgun hunters at the time really enjoyed the versatility and flexibility of the Contender, being able to switch between multiple barrels and do different things with it, whether you're target shooting with cheaper 22 caliber and hunting with something bigger, right? So also going into like right around the time that KW Thompson started a marketing campaign, that's when when he started marketing for the Contender, that's when the name change officially happened, and they changed it to Thompson Center Arms, obviously for the owners of the company, Warren Center and KW Thompson. So Thompson Center Arms was born right around the time of the Contender coming out and getting into market. So back, and then in 1970, Thompson Center entered a new venture and revived a dying industry in muzzleloading. And their first foray into the muzzleloading world was the beautiful Hawken rifle, which we'll talk about more later. But they really did revamp and bring back the muzzleloading industry, if you will, because it's kind of a dying industry back then. So came out with the Hawken back in 1970, and then TC took it up a notch and started developing all sorts of new pistols and muzzleloaders. They just kept the ball rolling on that, and they even started producing long barrels and butt stocks for their pistols. And the ever-changing Contender and Encore series can now easily be changed from pistol to rifle with ease. This amazing development didn't come with its challenges, though, or didn't come without its own challenges, though, and it didn't take too long for the ATF to come in and attempt to ruin all the fun and the freedom and that TC brought to market. So when they started developing the Contender and Encore series, they started playing with the idea and making butt stocks and long barrels for it. So you could go from a single shot handgun to a single shot rifle with very easily swap back and forth parts, right? So the ATF, they came down and they're like, you know what? That shit's illegal. We don't like that, because what if someone had a handgun barrel and then put a butt stock on it, which you technically could do, I guess. Excuse me. Which you could do, I guess, but that's not what it was marketed for. But the ATF, they didn't give a fuck. They came down, they said, you know what, you can't produce this anymore because you can essentially make an SBR, a single shot SBR, which, oh my gosh, yes, how dare ye come out and start and make a short barreled single shot fucking rifle. That is absurd. We can't have that because of the NFA. So the ATF is like, nope, not doing it. But Thompson Center, they came back and said, well, that's not what we're marketing it for. We're not saying, hey, this is a loophole and you guys can have SBRs now if you buy Thompson Center. That's not what they're doing. They're saying like you can switch between a handgun and then put a long barrel on it over 16 inches and put a butt stock on it, so then you can have a rifle. It's a pretty slick idea. I think it's super awesome. But the ATF, they didn't like it. And Thompson Center said, well, it's bullshit. We're going to take you to court and we're going to fight this. So Thompson Center essentially took the ATF to court. It went through the system and it ended up in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, if you will. And they fought it out, duked it out. And there was something in the argument they're saying, like, so the ATF was saying, like, if you have in your possession a handgun barrel and the butt stock, then that's illegal, because just the mere possession of the two makes it the possibility of it being a short-barreled rifle, right? So there was some sort of argument that they put out there where it's like, farmers are allowed to have like anhydrous and other shit that they're not trying to make bombs, but they have all the ingredients to make a bomb, but they're not making bombs. So, but they're allowed to have that. Like, why can't we have this? So the Supreme Court heard all the arguments. The Supreme Court also ended up siding with Thompson Center Arms. That's right. So Thompson Center Arms came back, and fought the ATF, and then the Supreme Court told the ATF to pound sand and get out of here with that bullshit, because this is America, land of the free, and we should be able to do at least some of the things that we want, even though it is highly regulated and with all these bullshit laws. And all you guys know how I feel about the NFA and the ATF and all that stuff, so I don't need to go into detail about that necessarily, but it's pretty badass that a company takes the ATF to court and wins. And that's honestly, in my opinion, a big win for America and a big win for freedom. So you can thank Thompson Center Arms for that, because it's pretty ballsy of them to do that. They could have just folded over and said, nah, you're right. Okay, we won't do that anymore. We won't innovate anymore. We won't push the boundaries and make things better. So they won. ATF lost. win for the good guys. Pretty awesome. But unfortunately, in March of 1997, Thompson Center suffered a devastating fire that destroyed 3 of the company's buildings in Rochester, New Hampshire. Even though it was a huge setback for TC, they were able to keep most everyone gainfully employed, and many of the workers actually ended up helping with the cleanup and the rebuild of the iconic gun manufacturer. And we talked quite a bit about this with Greg Ritz on the past episode, so if you guys want to go back and listen to that part, he goes into detail about how the New England mentality came out and they rebuilt, right? So that's pretty badass. It just kind of goes to show that Thompson Center built such a strong, loyal base with not only their customers, but also with their workforce, for them to sit around and be like, you know what, we want to rebuild because we believe in this company and we want it to come back. So they stuck around, rebuilt that bitch, and Thompson Center continued to thrive after that. And then about 10 years later, in January of 2007, Smith and Wesson ended up purchasing the company for $102 million, and they maintained TC until May of 2021. But when Smith and Wesson unveiled a long-term strategy that no longer included Thompson Center, which is essentially a nice way of saying that Smith and Wesson didn't want to bother with Thompson Center anymore. They basically got what they wanted from them, and they got the manufacturing power that they bought from TC and some of the workers that decided to move with them. But they ended up shelving TC due to a long-term strategy that just no longer included them, which essentially I think Smith and Wesson just wanted to focus on Smith and Wesson guns and just didn't want to mess around with Thompson Center, because Thompson Center Arms, their sales did drop dramatically in those later years. So Smith and Wesson kind of just cut the cord, and like, we can't maintain it for the output that is going out the doors with Thompson Center firearms. We just don't have the manpower and stuff to really keep going with it when it's not, the ROI is too great. So they just shelved it, and they still had the intellectual property rights and all that stuff of Thompson Center, so no one else could recreate Thompson Center stuff without I guess their blessing or whatever it is. I don't really know that business stuff too well, but basically they put TC on the shelf and stopped producing. And this is where Greg Ritz enters the picture. So a once great American gun company was now collecting dust in the corner of Smith & Wesson headquarters, and then Greg Ritz came along, got with his bros, like I already explained, and they bought back Thompson Center Arms, which is absolutely amazing because, like I said, iconic gun company, American made, American workers, American everything, American to the bone, and to see that just kind of go away is fairly unsettling, I think. So it's nice that it came back with the right people behind the brand that are going to propel it forward. Greg's got a huge following. He's got a TV show. He's got all the assets to make Thompson Center great again, if you will. You get like that? Make Thompson Center great again. Let's do it. Come on, Greg. Let's go. So let's move on to the guns. So I'm just going to really kind of go through some of the more interesting guns, in my opinion, and kind of just give you guys a good overview on it and why I'm personally so interested in it, because in my opinion, like, the OG Contender, fucking sweet. But we'll talk about that a little bit. So the OG Contender, the original Contender, right, from the 60s, that's the one that put TC on the map. It's a break action single shot pistol that can easily change barrels and calibers with ease by removing the fore end and popping out a hinge pin, so you can be shooting a multitude of calibers ranging from like 22 LR to 45-70, and a bunch of other different wildcats were born in between as well. So the Contender really got a really big following for quite a while. It got so big where a bunch of dudes were making wildcat rounds specifically for their Contenders to shoot and hunt with. So that's pretty badass. But like I've talked about this ad nauseum. It's just such an interesting and versatile platform that it deserves being talked about again. So the Encore was then released in the late 90s and came with a few upgrades in order to handle some of the more potent loads. They also changed up the brake action, making it smoother and easier to open up. And true to TC fashion, there are multitude of cool calibers you can be shooting out of the Encore. There's actually about 86 different barrels that you can get for the Encore, and that is everything ranging from the little 22 Hornet to the ridiculously big 416 Rigby out of that motherfucker. So, and actually, I was reading, and there's actually a 600 Nitro Express barrel running around out there in the wild. So if you guys get yourself an Encore, you can be shooting all sorts of different stuff. And there's honestly, the sky's the limit with the Encore. There's so many different things you can do. And the barrels at the time weren't that expensive either. So you could essentially have, 86 different firearms if you got all the barrels, kind of like Pokemon, gotta catch them all kind of thing. So if you gathered up and collected all the different barrels, you could be shooting all the different calibers, 86 different ones. And granted, it's a single shot, but especially in the hunting situation, Greg talked about it a little bit, and he's like, I like the single shot because it makes people take their time a little bit more and make their shots worth, take their time on it and everything else. I usually opt for more firepower. Maybe it's just the military in me that likes to have more, more bullets wins more wars kind of thing. But he is right where you get one shot, make it count kind of thing. That's really what TC's deal is all about. So especially when we get into muzzle loading, it's all about one shot, right? TC, make your shot count. One shot, one kill. You know what I'm saying? So that should be their slogan. But also, I get sidetracked a little bit. So the Encore also, they made a bunch of different barrels for shotguns. So not only could you be shooting center fire cartridges out of an Encore, but you could also be shooting shotgun shells out of it. And they had barrels for 28 gauge, 12 gauge, and I think 410 even. So they had all sorts of different gauges that you could be using the Encore with to hunt whatever, turkeys, fucking whatever you want, right? Single shot shotgun at that point. And what's even more interesting about the Encore is they made it so you can further change it up and put a muzzleloader barrel on it, and you can turn that whole thing into a freaking muzzleloader. So you could literally buy an Encore and you could be hunting, turkeys in the spring, deer in the fall during, gun season, or winter, depending on wherever your gun season lands. Like in Iowa, it's in December. So I could take an Encore, put a shotgun barrel on it and shoot slugs out of that thing and hunt deer. Or I could put, a 35 Whalen barrel on it and hunt deer too. So I could use the same gun, change the barrel out from turkey season shooting turkeys to deer season shooting deer. And then we're getting into late season. I could change the barrel and put a muzzleloader barrel on it and use it all late season and hunt deers as well. One gun, literally doing it all. It's pretty amazing. You just need different barrels. It's super easy to change them out. So that's the cool thing about the Encore. Lots of versatility there. Very, very cool, I think. Then they came out with the Contender G2. So in order to replace the original Contender, they realized there were some flaws with that, being the 60s and stuff. A little bit later, they decided they're going to do the Contender G2, which is just the version 2 of their Contender series, right? It was created to replace the original, like I said, and it basically had the same design, the same general design, but what they did change up is they put an Encore trigger group on it, and then the butt stocks and pistol grips won't interchange between the two because I think it's like the slope of the gun, like it is a little bit different where you won't be able to change the butt stocks and pistol grips as much, but the barrels will interchange between the Encore and the Contender G2 for the most part, with the exception of, I think it's like the Harriet barrels and forends, they won't interchange, and some of the muzzleloading barrels won't interchange. But pretty cool, honestly, that they came with the Contender G2 and kind of kept that going as well. Now we'll get into the muzzleloading aspect of it. This is where I think TC really hit it out of the park as far as commercial use, if you will. They got really popular on their muzzleloaders because, like I said, they really revamped and brought the muzzleloading community back from the dead back in the 70s. So in that, like I said, that all started with the Hawken rifle. The Hawken rifle really propelled TC into uncharted territories, because there's a little movie, Greg Ritz talked about it too on the podcast yesterday, but there's a little movie called Jeremiah Johnson that came out, and he was using a Hawken rifle throughout that whole movie. So that's pretty badass. But the Hawken rifle really did bring TC up in the muzzleloading community, and then it just spanned off from there. So they started making all sorts of different muzzleloaders. I'm sure a lot of you have used the Triumph or the Pro Hunter or the Impact, and there's just a lot of really good muzzleloaders, like inline muzzleloaders, that they ended up coming out with as well. And they were doing some really cool things. I think it was the Impact. They changed the breech plug on it, so it was just like a quarter turn or a 90-degree turn, and that breech plug came out. Super easy, because a lot of breech plugs, even today, like I have a CVA, and it's a great muzzleloader. I love CVA as well, but you have to, in order to take the breech plug out, you have to turn it quite a bit. And back then too, there's a lot of them you had to use a tool. So I think like Knights muzzleloaders, you had to use a special tool to back that whole breech plug out, and it took forever. It was a shit ton of turns in order to get that breech plug out. And Thompson Center, actually, I think Greg Ritz, he was talking about yesterday as well, how they brought up, created that, super quick breech plug for their muzzleloaders. I think it was the Impact, but pretty badass. They were always innovating and always doing new things. And being a smaller company, family owned and operated, they were able to pivot with the industry pretty quickly and change a lot of things up, and R&D didn't take as long, so it really streamlined the whole process. So it's really exciting to see that come back too. So I'm not going to keep this dragging on too terribly long, because we already did a big long episode about TC with Greg Ritz, but just basically in conclusion, in my opinion, this is just what I like to end with here, is end on a positive note, right? So Thompson Center is an iconic brand with a fierce following. They really made their stake in the industry by caring, though. And it wasn't just the innovative, high-quality products they were selling. It was also the fact that TC cared about its people. They listened to their customer base, and they treated their workforce like family. It was when customers were buying Thompson Center products, it was also the peace of mind that they weren't only buying a quality product, but they were also buying into a community of like-minded individuals that shared their passion for shooting sports and hunting and the outdoors in general. So that community that they built back then was just such a cool, tight-knit community. And it's just going to be a joy to see them come back and rise from the ashes like a phoenix and continue on as a small mom and pop, freaking family-owned and operated company, and bringing it back from like the bigger corporations and just doing it right, I think. So very excited for Greg, very excited for Thompson Center, very excited to see what they come out with next. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Like I said before, and previous episodes, leave me a rating and review if you want to. Hit me up on socials. Let me know how it's going on, what your feedback is, and what you guys would like to hear in upcoming episodes. I know this week was just Thompson Center all the time, and I don't want to beat it down too much and wear out a good thing. It's kind of like those jokes that last too long, or someone keeps saying them over and over and over again. I don't want that. So this will be the last time I talk about TC for quite a while, but I'm just very excited. Very cool product, very cool people behind the product, and I'm just very excited to see something new in the industry. It hasn't, I shouldn't say new, I guess it's old, but something come back. This good news is nice to hear from time to time. Okay. So I appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate all your feedback and appreciate all of your support. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one.